You speak well for a deaf person. ASL isn't a real language. I'll tell you later. He is smart for being deaf. These are a few examples of common phrases that deaf individuals experience more often than not. The purpose of my speech is to inform my audience of the different settings that autism occurs. When thinking about societal oppression, many people automatically think of racism or sexism. However, there are many other types of oppression, such as autism, which is oppression based on the inability to hear. I've spent almost 2 years interacting with the deaf community and studying deaf culture. I've watched documentaries, heard stories, and even witnessed a few situations where autism has occurred. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take the time to make aware that autism occurs often and in many different settings, such as school, work, and home. First, I would like to focus on the school setting. This semester in college, I'm working my practicum, and I've been assigned to an elementary school locally. I get a first-hand view of the different ways that autism occurs in the school. One way that autism occurs in the school system is that the deaf student will almost always have an interpreter with them, and other kids are less likely to interact with them because of that. This results in the child not really forming friendships or relationships throughout their school years. Another instance that autism occurs in schools is through oralism. In an article written by Tanmoy Batak, it is said that a study was done and that schools that focus heavily on speech, the students after 7 or 8 years were incapable not only of speaking, but of writing the teacher's name or even their own. Hearing people tend to spend so much time on trying to make the deaf become hearing that they are depriving deaf children of basic skills and ultimately resulting in the child becoming dependent on others for the remainder of their life. Autism doesn't stop at school though. When deaf individuals finish school or move into the workforce, they experience autism there as well. Autism in the workforce is completely different and yet the same. The first instance that I want to discuss where autism occurs is in the hiring process. Deaf people have a great difficulty getting hired because they are seen as disabled. Deaf people can do anything that hearing people can, except hear. Many people believe that deaf people can't drive. They can. Many people won't hire deaf people because they think that they're stupid since they have difficulty reading and writing properly. Many people who are deaf, who weren't failed as students, are extremely successful and can read and write just as well, if not better, than hearing people. Many employers are reluctant to hire deaf individuals because they think that the deaf person will need an interpreter 100% of the time. The employer doesn't want to hire 2 people for a job that only requires 1. However, in most cases, an interpreter is only required for the initial period, if at all, to get the deaf person acclimated to the environment. Then, the deaf person can work without the interpreter and most likely do a better job than the hearing because they're less likely to get distracted. Sadly, autism not only occurs at school and at work, but it also is very common when it comes to home life. According to studies, 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. In many cases, when parents find out that their child is deaf, they will subject their child to many different surgeries to help them hear, and in many cases, the surgeries are unsuccessful. Many doctors recommend to the parents not to learn sign language or to teach their child sign language because it will only slow down the speaking process. However, studies show that children who are exposed to ASL at a young language are significantly more successful than the children who never learned or learn at an older age. Another instance that autism occurs is at the dinner table when the whole family is spending time together. More often than not, the hearing family will only speak at these times and not sign, which will leave the deaf child out. When the deaf child asks, what did they say, or why is everyone laughing, they're typically told, I'll tell you later, or it's too much to explain now. More often than not, the deaf child is never told what is said and they feel left out of the family. In conclusion, I would like to remind you that the purpose of my speech was to inform my audience of the different settings that autism occurs. Autism occurs very often for deaf people, and we, hearing people, never even know that we're doing it. It occurs everywhere for them, whether at school, work, or at home. Hopefully, as the world is changing and becoming more accepting of minority groups, they keep in mind that deaf people are people too.